Hooponopono has these 4 phrases to help you return to this state of zero, this state of divine infinite intelligence, that which you are, that when you are present, when you are clear-minded, when you are feeling good, when your heart is open, that energy that flows through you is absolutely wonderful. Hello and welcome to the James Granstrom Podcast Super Soul Model Series, where I help you tune and tap into your natural state of well-being. Have you heard of the ancient Hawaiian practice of Hooponopono? Because if you haven't, I'm going to share what it is and how it will help improve the quality of your life and the quality of your relationships in this episode. The word Hooponopono means to correct an error, and it comes from the ancient Hawaiian healing practice of reconciliation and forgiveness. And the reason why it's so powerful is because it's so simple. Why could something be so simple and yet so effective? And that's what I want to really clarify in this episode. When we are trying to correct and make right, we are using this ancient Hawaiian ritual or practice. And when we're doing it, what we're actually doing is coming from a place of divine energy. And that is what was called in this book that I read back in 2008, Zero Limits, by Dr. Joe Vitale, who was one of the main cast on The Secret. And the reason why Hooponopono really sits with me is because I've been to Hawaii 3 times. I've studied this beautiful culture, and yet there's something in it that really resonates with me. And if this episode resonates with you, then that is amazing. But at least if you can take these 4 simple phrases that you can use to empower the quality of your life, to release negativity, to find reconciliation and healing and allow more abundance in your experience, then Hooponopono is something you really need to be considering, thinking of making a daily practice, a daily ritual. So what is Hooponopono? Hooponopono is an ancient healing technique that helps restore balance in the body and in the mind. And when we practice Hooponopono, what we're essentially doing is talking to our inner child, the subconscious mind, which would be another word to describe the inner child that's always running the show. And when you're talking to it from this position with these 4 phrases that I will talk about and why they're powerful, what it will do is reset your system. It will reboot your mind. And if you can imagine, before the ages of about 10 and in 12 in some cases, you were storing and receiving information, sponging from your guardians, sponging from your parents, understanding how the world works. And if you had any trauma in those early years, which most people have, what's actually happening is that's stored in your subconscious mind, and you start to act out those painful, traumatic programs later in life. And when we are looking to heal ourselves, one of the first places we need to go is to go back to this subconscious mind, where we can clear away the negative patterns and impressions that have been sponged by us vibrationally or in the environment that we were conditioned in order to return to a state of zero, meaning a clean state, meaning that divine state of which you were when you first came in to the world when you were a little baby. But when you come from this place of being able to be clear, to be open, to be receptive, that's the place where great ideas come. That's where the place where you receive good ideas for business, for art, for creativity, for flow. But when we're in the mind and it's incessantly playing, we are running old programs and old stories the whole time. So that's why Hooponopono is so effective. And it's so effective to wash away and cleanse any trauma that's been in our system. It's so effective in being able to help you find a place of abundance within yourself. It's so effective in being able to help other people in your sphere in your life as well. So talk about raising your frequency. Hooponopono will raise your frequency. It will empower you. And I want to share some case studies of why it is so powerful and how it's helped others and how it will help you. But let me first talk about this book, because this book was what inspired me in the first place. I'd already been to Hawaii a few times, and I really loved the culture, and there was something about it that talked to me and spoke to me on a sort of soul level. The positioning, the beauty, the way that the culture converse and interact with one another, it's always like a celebration. Yet they're strong, they're powerful, the seafaring folk. And yet there's this beauty, this goddess, this real connection with the land. This is why I really love the ancient Hawaiians. But also, what I want to share is that what I particularly like about Hooponopono is this story. Because the story that inspired me is that a Hawaiian named Dr. Hugh Len, he went into a psychiatric ward in Hawaii in the 1980s and was fully practicing Hooponopono. And he was doing it quietly without telling anybody. He was just going about saying these things. And these 4 phrases that he was using was, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. And he was repeating them over and over and over again. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and thank you. These are the cleansing phrases he used over and over again. That is the Hooponopono practice for reconciliation and healing and forgiveness. Because Hooponopono is so interesting, it's an inside-out type of healing, meaning the external world out there will change when I change the inside. And Hooponopono states that everything that happens to you and in your sphere of influence is a result of your subconscious patterning, your subconscious programming that's going on. And so everything that's happening in your life is a result of your subconscious mind that's running the show. Because if you're with me so far, then everything that's happening to you is your doing, and everything that you like is your doing, and everything that you don't like is also your doing. This is part of the law of attraction. But what we don't understand is, why can we attract some things and not attract others? And the reason being is because that subconscious mind, that inner child, is preventing you with stories and negative programming from allowing you to experience what you want. Maybe it's more material wealth, but also it might be releasing trauma. It might be being unable to forgive. It might be challenge with a parent. It could be a host of different things. And until you start cleansing, until you start using this practice Hooponopono, you're just going to stay stuck. So this is a very quick, effective way to be able to cleanse your subconscious mind, to clean the slate, to nourish that inner child of yours, and to clean the system, the negative programming that's been going on in your life for so many years. So if you're ready, I want to share with you a story that really inspired me. So Dr. Hugh Len went into a psychiatric ward in the 1980s in Hawaii, and what he did was he went through all the files of some of the hardened criminals, the crooks, the murderers, rapists, all these very unpleasant people, and he'd pull out the file, not necessarily go in front of them, but he'd go into their files and he'd start saying these 4 phrases. And after a period of about 5 years, most people were released because they were of sound mind, and then the rest of it was shut down, meaning the whole psychiatric ward was shut down because it was unnecessary for these people to be here anymore. And this was really unusual, because Dr. Hugh Len said, when I cleansed myself of my own subconscious programming with these 4 phrases by using Hooponopono, it also healed these other people. And this is not dissimilar to the Buddha or the Christ when people sat in their presence. They were healed because they weren't looked at with judgment anymore. They were healed by the purity of the energy. So this is why Zero Limits, the book, means you're becoming zero, which means you're becoming one with that divine frequency. And whilst you may not be there all day, if you're able to practice this divine energy, which are these 4 phrases, then what's going to happen is that you too will emanate that divine frequency from within you that will also cleanse your environment as well. And Dr. Hugh Len has always said, you must always be doing these 3 things. Always be cleaning. And Dr. Hugh Len said in some of his lectures and in the book that your mind is very much like a hardware of a laptop or a computer. And there's some positive programs on there, and there's some negative programs on there. And the negative programs need to be cleansed so you can have more storage space for your divine essence, which is who you really are, to be able to flow through. So you can receive the ideas that improve the quality of your life, so you can be one with your heart, mind, and soul. Now that sounds fascinating in the bigger picture, but the practical work is by saying these 4 phrases. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. And it doesn't really matter which order you're saying them. It just matters that you think them, you say them, and you do them. And it's always like a computer program that's running behind the scenes. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. Now, I was fascinated by this. And of course, at the beginning, I was very open-minded, and I thought, yeah, I want to believe that. And so it was only when I started to have my own challenges in relationships that's when I started to use them, those 4 phrases. And that's when I was like, wow, I think this really works, because I got my own experience. So I'm here as a messenger to tell you that this will work if you use it. But don't believe me until you get that experience, because your belief has to come through your own personal experience. And that is the bit that I always find fascinating, because when it comes to receiving new information, particularly spiritual information, I always want to ground that spiritual information in a way that's practical and down to earth. And does it work? I know for sure gratitude works, and that's one of the phrases. But to use the other phrases as well, such as I love you, I'm sorry, and please forgive me, those kind of phrases, I was like, well, I'm not sure. But let's just try, let's practice. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I moved into a new place, and I just finished a relationship. And when I moved into this new place, I was living with a friend of mine. And when I was sleeping at night, I heard this voice. And it wasn't a voice inside of my head. It was a voice in the next property. On the other side of the wall, because I was living in a Victorian property and the walls weren't that particularly thick or soundproof. And I could kind of make out that it was an old woman speaking. And I was like, well, what's she actually saying? And she'd say it for literally hours in the middle of the night. And I like to take full responsibility of my life, knowing that everything that's happening is of my doing, whether I like it or not. And in the end, I managed to decipher this very strange voice was saying, you're bad. So, and she kept on going, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. And that was a judgment she was giving herself, because at some point in her life, she'd felt programmed that she was a bad person. And I know that this person never really left that room, because I looked next door when I was looking at the property to see these really shabby curtains, and that person wasn't well. And so I took it upon myself to do this cleansing. I took it upon myself to be able to do Hooponopono work, say those 4 phrases, to try and find peace within myself, because at that time I'd also finished a relationship which I didn't feel good about, and I still felt like heavy. And so I thought, well, I need to do cleansing, I need to do cleaning work on myself, so let's just do some Hooponopono here. So for a few minutes every night, I would put my hand on the wall and I'd say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and thank you. And just try and send like love and well wishes and forgiveness on the other side of the wall. Now, sometimes I'd put my hand on the wall in the middle of the night when I'd hear her speaking, and sometimes I'd just do it from my bed. But either way, I did it, and I did it for literally months. Until one night, I heard nothing. And it was a very unusual night, because I was like, I'm not actually hearing that person. And I was always kind of intrigued to see who was on the other side of the wall, but I always wanted to think that it was another version of myself, because in truth, we're all one. So if that's the case, then it doesn't matter who's on the other side of the wall, it's me. And even if they're in pain, and even if they're saying this thing that seems very annoying in the middle of the night, nonetheless, the only ways that it can be healed is by someone trying to come from a higher advantage point, someone wanting to come from a higher frequency. And the higher frequency above pain, above guilt, above grief is love. So that's where I was wanting to come from, love and forgiveness and compassion. So that's why I was putting my hand on the wall. And if you're with me so far, after about, I think, 7 or 8 months of saying, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you, the noise stopped, the voice stopped. And the next day I saw an ambulance come, and it wasn't to our property, it was to the next door property, only to discover that person had passed away. And I like to think of that as a beautiful coincidence, to say that by my cleansing, that person was also being released back into heaven, back into a better place than being bound in a body and feeling really awful about themselves and about life and speaking to themselves in that really painful way. That is a real compassion. And so that experience of me was really, really visceral. I couldn't escape from the noise. I couldn't escape from that sound, 12 o'clock every night for at least a couple of hours. I mean, it kind of drove me a little bit insane. So it was my way of being able to cleanse, being able to heal. And that was a true story. And I noticed that my life began to improve significantly when I was using these phrases. So if you're out of sorts in any relationships, if you're experiencing any trauma, then if Dr. Hugh Len did that with a psychiatric ward in Hawaii for 5 years, and I had my own experience of perhaps something lesser, but nonetheless still wow factor, then if you're out of sorts with anybody, then practice Hooponopono, practice these 4 phrases, and just be open-minded that what you're doing is cleansing yourself, which is also allowing other people in your sphere of energy, to also be healed by your presence, to be healed by your energy, because all energy can be also non-local. They've shown this in quantum physics, that you can have something going on in London and in Australia exactly the same amount of time. And we human beings are all made up of energy and molecules. So it's no different. So when you're thinking of somebody, how often have you thought of somebody and then they phone you? Particularly like a parent. That is such a normal aspect of energy. So our thoughts are creative, but it's also our feelings are magnetic. So when we're able to think and feel with these 4 phrases of Hooponopono, then what you're doing is starting to heal your subconscious mind. You're starting to become in touch with your inner child, and you're allowing that divine energy to flow within you, which will uplift everything that comes into your sphere and into your day-to-day life. And like Dr. Hugh Len said in the book Zero Limits, he goes, you've always got to be cleaning something. So another story I really liked that I put to practice just for my own personal test, because I like to test these things, is that Dr. Hugh Len said that he would go into a cafe or a restaurant, and he would cleanse and say these 4 phrases to himself. And he'd go into an empty coffee shop or an empty restaurant somewhere in Hawaii. And, when he'd go in there, he noticed that by cleansing that place, by having those 4 phrases running, the shop would fill up. And his energy alone was very magnetic. So after a while, he said, would you give me a free meal if this place fills up with customers? And the patrons of the coffee shop or the restaurant said, yeah, we'll give it a go if it fills up. And lo and behold, it filled up with him being in there. So he got a free meal, because he just wanted to know, is this energy working? Does this Ho'opono work? And how does it work? And it just really works because it helps you raise your frequency. And when you raise your frequency, you become more magnetic. And in order to attract greater business, in order to attract love, in order to attract harmony and restore balance back in the body again, what it takes is a higher frequency. And of course, these 4 phrases, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you, are very high forms of frequency. And if we're looking at things like water, with Dr. Emoto Masuro, he studied water in Japan, and I've talked about this on another episode, but when he was writing these phrases of "I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you and I love you" underwater, water started to produce these beautiful crystals, these beautiful patterns that we can now see under the microscope once it was frozen. And we're all made of water, so if we're thinking thoughts like "I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you," we're also changing the dynamics of the water inside us. We are changing our frequency. This is why Hooponopono is so powerful. So I went and tried to do this study, although I did it a little bit differently. I didn't ask for a free meal, but I did want to go into certain shops to see that if I went in there and I was practicing being in a higher frequency using these 4 phrases, would it fill up? And I have been astonished to find that shops have filled up when I've been the first person in there. And that actually even happened last week in a shop. I just went in looking for a product and I thought, oh yeah, it's something I'd like to buy. But I was saying those 4 phrases, thinking about this episode that I wanted to share with you. And lo and behold, like 10 people walked in the shop, and this was like on a Sunday. And I was really astonished by how powerful this is. In the end, I didn't buy anything in that shop, but I was intending to, but I didn't. But it was really nice to see that shop filled up regardless. Now, is that a coincidence, you might ask? And I would say, I don't know. But I tell you what I do know is I know that energy never lies. And when you're practicing a higher frequency, good stuff happens to everybody you know in your sphere of influence. That is the power of being at a higher frequency. Because when you're tuning and tapping into your natural state of energy, that higher frequency, that is your divine energy flowing, which will be benevolent to all. So let's just go in a little bit more depth about the 4 phrases. I'm sorry means acknowledging responsibility for your thoughts, words and actions and your energy and how it's affected others. That is why when you say I'm sorry in a relationship, it disarms any negativity between you and the other person. Now, when you're saying please forgive me, you're asking forgiveness for yourself and for others. Because when you're coming from this place of please forgive me, it's just stating that you know that was incorrect. And so when you're asking forgiveness, please forgive me, you're saying, I want to cleanse that. I want to allow that to subside. And when you're saying thank you, you're expressing gratitude for the opportunity to heal. And when you're saying I love you, you're sending love to oneself and to others. So this is a wonderful, powerful sphere of high frequency with these 4 phrases that when used with a sense of emotion can really change the molecular structure in your body and affect your external world. This is what Hooponopono really is. It helps you change your internal world so you can affect your external world, because the world is always reflecting your internal state. As above, so below. As within, so without. These are the spiritual laws. Hooponopono has these 4 phrases to help you return to this state of zero, this state of divine infinite intelligence, that which you are, that when you are present, when you are clear-minded, when you are feeling good, when your heart is open, that energy that flows through you is absolutely wonderful. So Hooponopono is mainly just to restore balance and restore harmony again. And if you had any past traumas, this is a wonderful healing modality. And if you're looking to heal relationships, it's a wonderful healing modality. And if you're looking to increase the level of abundance and prosperity in your life, so by using Hooponopono, you will cleanse that data. You will cleanse those negative programs. So in short, it's powerful to be able to reset your programs, your inner program, your subconscious mind, so that you are able to now operate from this state of zero, this state of cleansed. Because when you feel clean, you're able to receive more. It's basically like clean your home of negative programming, meaning clean your home of clutter, and you will allow more good stuff to come in. So another spiritual law which Hooponopono applies to is nature abhors a vacuum. And what it means by that, if there's any space, don't worry, nature will fill it. And if your mind is filled with negative programming, it can't fill it with more good stuff, because those are the seeds you've planted. So in conclusion, Hooponopono is super simple and it's super powerful. But don't believe me until you start applying those 4 phrases. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. And just notice what shows up. Just as a little caveat, I had this gratitude practice that I've been doing at the beginning of the year, and I call it the art of extreme gratitude. But one of the things that really took me was when I'd misplaced something, not once, but twice, something really important to me. I just said, thank you for helping me find that. Thank you for helping me find that, which is just one of the 4 phrases. And thank you for great business. Thank you for helping so many, being able to help so many people. Thank you for the success of this show and this podcast. Thank you. I'm really feeling all my thank yous. This is just one of the 4 phrases of Hooponopono. I noticed, not that I needed it, I noticed that my fortunes turned around even when I was feeling off, even when I was feeling like, oh, I've lost that item. Those items were a pair of sunglasses that I really treasured and had sentimental value. But when I found them, I was like, oh my golly, this really works. So then my experience became knowledge. So this is really what I'm trying to share with you. Hooponopono will work and does work, but you have to get your own experience. So I hope this inspires you. I hope this message inspires you to practice it so you get your own experience, because that's the teacher. I'm just the messenger. Feel free to write in and share with me your experiences and what's happened to you, because this is powerful when we share it with each other. And if you'd love to support the show to keep getting more high quality content and material, I really appreciate it. Whenever you're supporting the show, you're also supporting that which will empower you. And I'd just also like to say thank you so much for tuning in, because you make this show possible. And I've just got so much love and appreciation for you all. So thank you so much for tuning in. And until the next time, I wish you a wonderful week ahead, and green lights all the way.